we have a question today from July in the UK.
Julie, you knucklehead.
It says spelled July. I don't know what to tell you.
Well, that's how you say Julie. That's how would you spell the name Julie?
Julie?
No.
Yes.
Oh, you might be right. I may have spelled it wrong.
Welcome to the Two Authors Podcast, an entertaining chat show hosted by best-selling mystery and thriller authors Douglas Pratt and Nicholas Harvey, in lively, humorous and informative conversation with distinguished guests who share their thoughts and experience about forging a successful author career.
Welcome to this week's show. How you doing, Mr. Nick?
I'm great. How are you, bud?
I'm doing fabulous. You're looking very good, dapper.
It's release day for me. It won't be when this comes out in a month, but it'll be old hat by then. But today is release day.
But your book is a Christmas book, so even in a month when this comes out, if you haven't read this yet, it's Nora and it's Christmas, right? So
yeah, it's set around Christmas time. I wouldn't call it a Christmas book, but it's called Festive Summer.
It's called Festive, so that's as Christmassy as I want to get. So
in October, and yeah, so it'll, when this airs, it'll be late November. It's about time. I'm always kind of. I'm the president of Keep Christmas in December, but post-Thanksgiving is kind of acceptable.
But when you're doing a book that's Christmassy, people are going to read it early, and so you might as well.
Yeah, get you in the spirit. So
I don't know. But hey, I think we have a question today from July in the UK.
Julie, you knucklehead.
Julie. Okay, well. It says spelled July. I don't know what to tell you.
Well, that's how you say Julie. That's how would you spell the name Julie?
Julie?
No.
Yes.
Oh, you might be right. I may have spelled it wrong. Classic. I'm the knucklehead.
I don't know. Julie. Yeah, okay. Julie in the UK asked us, do you use pictures and detailed descriptions for your characters to reference as you're writing?
That's a good question. Yeah, I do. And I used to, for my main characters and even the sort of main antagonists in each story, I would search the interwebs and kind of put in a description and then find an actor or something that, some picture that came up. I go, yeah, that's kind of the look I'm thinking of. So I have a consistent cue throughout the writing. I don't use AI for much, but I do use it for graphics, not for my book covers, but for advertising and for this purpose. So it is brilliant for putting in a description of somebody and spitting out the image of your characters. So relatively quickly now, what used to took a lot more time searching, I can now in less time produce an image that is kind of what I have in my head. So I'll get that picture and then I'll write a couple of details about that person that I can refer to.
I have done that. I don't do it consistently as far as the pictures. And I have used the AI if I'm trying to, in Midnight Dance, I had several Colombian police officers. And so I did have it, ChatGPT, create about 5 different pictures for me that were going to match it. And that way I could remember which ones were which. But most of the time I don't do it. But I do use is a lot of pictures and stuff for locations. So I'm real big about like running, if I've got, in Midnight Dance, even though I went and walked through everything in Cartagena, I still went back and used both the pictures I took. And as I'm down there, I'd take the pictures, but I'd also go look for other pictures and Google Maps. And you can, to me, Google Maps and Google Earth is brilliant for that because you can walk through a street and remind yourself what it looked like, versus, and maybe a little bit outdated, but generally Google is pretty up to date within 6 months. So I think that really helps a lot as far as keeping things fairly accurate. So yeah, I do that.
Good question, July.
Yeah, July.
Otherwise known as Julie.
Poor Julie. Right. I'm so sorry, Julie. I can't help it that if that is how you spell your name, that is nothing wrong with that. It's just hard.
I'm pretty sure I wrote it down wrong.
Okay.
So my apologies, Julie. All right, let's move on to this week's guest, who is a lovely lady that I met the last 2 years at NINC, and we had to have her on the show. She's an urban fantasy author. Her name is Heather G. Harris, and let's meet her now.
Welcome to the show, Heather. It's great to have you here with us today. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
And it's evening time with you over in the UK. Tea time.
It is. It's bedtime.
If I had tea time right before bed, it would not be bedtime anymore. That'd be my problem. So Heather, hey, let's get kind of rolling. Can you give us kind of like a little bit of a brief intro about how you got started writing and publishing?
So I used to be a lawyer. And that's important because you can kind of understand the way in which I attacked writing, which was learn everything about it before I even really started writing. You know, I went and I did a deep dive and I learned a lot about marketing and about rapid release, about street teams, all these sorts of, all three things are out there as kind of the go-to good advice. So that when I kind of started publishing, I could really hit the ground running. And I started publishing in 2021. I published my first book in September, then October, then November, then December. Then January, I gave birth to my son. And I had a year of maternity leave.
Oh, what? You didn't publish a book? What were you doing?
Yeah, just kind of.
You had plenty of time to do that. Like, come on.
Yeah, I was chilling. Yeah, and my son is my third child, right? So I had two others already that I was juggling. So I did boom, 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 gave birth to my son. I had a year off being a lawyer.
That was a boom too. Yeah, boom,
yeah,
boom, boom,
boom. And to my delight, it took off in a way that was just mind-blowing. And I gave my notice to my law firm while I was still on maternity leave, and I've never had to go back. So I was one of those unicorn authors that hit it big out the park and haven't ever looked back.
Brilliant. That's a lovely story. And I think I heard somewhere or read somewhere that you used 20 books to 50K as a guide at that period of time.
Absolutely. So when I say I went away and did a ton of research, that's kind of where I went, and I mined that information there because there's just so much information. Everybody is so generous with giving their knowledge out to you. And there's so many different voices of experience. And it's amazing because there's so many people doing publishing in different ways. There's not a one size fits all and you must do X, but depending on what sort of thing you're doing, there's a load of information out there to kind of support the approach that you want to take. So yeah, it's a fantastic resource for anybody, I would say.
Oh yeah, totally. Completely. I think we all kind of scoured that site or that Facebook page when they were out there when we started. So.
Yeah. And 2021, that was, a lot of the authors we chat to who are established are like, I published my first book in 2014 or 2016, and that was on that steep slope of Kindle taking off. 2021 was jumping in with the masses getting on board of self-publishing. It was not an easy time to get started. So huge kudos. So I trolled you a little bit, like you do, and checked out your website. And I love your website. So it'll be in the links to the show notes. So everybody go take a look at this website. So the first thing you'll do is get mesmerized by the little star linking thing on the cover. I don't even know how to describe it. You like move your mouse around and it jumps and links these stars together, and you find yourself, you're like a cat with a red, like with the spotlight going back all over the place.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I gave it a reboot only probably about a year or so ago, but I was looking and I did a ton, as you're getting the vibe now, I did a ton of research to see what everyone else's kind of hot websites were. And they all needed some sort of video element to kind of look modern and swish. And so that the video element was kind of that opening page when you come on my website and you get to see my main character who's got flames in a hand and my main doggy sidekick's up there. And he's a big draw for people. So I you kind of land on my website and you see the dog straight away. And if you're in by then,
So the other thing that I loved and I was really intrigued by, and I want to ask you a bunch of stuff about, is there's a roadmap of how to read your series because you have multiple series. And there's kind of this roadmap of what order to go in. So I've got too many questions to ask about this, but was that conceived from the get-go? I'm going to have multiple series and I'm going to link them in this way, or did it happen organically as you went along?
So kind of a bit of both. I planned that if the first series went well, I would write more in the same series. But that was part of my kind of deep dive into the 20 books thing, that if you could write in the same universe, that really increases your read through because you're introducing side characters and then you're converting them into main protagonists, which obviously then the readers, if they've loved that person as a side character, are then eager to see them in their kind of the limelight themselves. So I started off with my first series, which is The Other Realm, with my main girl, Jinx. And then in the kind of process of that series, her best friend gets changed into a werewolf. So then she also has a series, of course, as does.
Happens to all of us, yeah.
Oh, God, that day when we all got turned to werewolves. Yeah, so
what a howling good time we had.
Oh, here he goes.
Lowering the tone.
When the guest groans, Doug, when the guest groans.
To be fair, you should know, on my newsletters, I start every newsletter with a dad joke. So like normally I'm the one who is always celebrating the dad joke there, Doug. Like I'm there.
That's all right.
What do you call a werewolf who meditates?
What do you call a werewolf that meditates?
And a werewolf.
That is full-blown dad joke.
That's normally my level. But anyway, so back to the universe thing. The hard thing as I started writing this interlinked universe was that events were crossing over. So in my advanced reader team or my street team, one of the people just yesterday did a reading order where you could read like chapter 1 in this book and chapter 1 of that book is the same events, but from different POVs. So they've gone through my series and they've kind of lined up all of the chapters across and where they interlink and everything, which you can imagine is actually incredibly difficult to write.
Oh my gosh. That's a super fan too.
So real quick, give me did you say how many series do you have altogether?
So I've got 3 in one universe. And then I've got another brand new one that's a separate world that I do with a co-author, a friend of mine. So
like when you do this, and you're ending a few of these series, and how do you decide when to end them or when to start a new one? Or
yeah, so it's mostly a commercial decision. So, for example, my werewolf one, it's having a book release on the 1st of November, and that's the last one in that series. And that's the one that has not performed as well as the other series, so I'm not going to continue it past that point. I had told my fans and I promised that I would write more in that series and give her kind of the happy ever after that they all wanted for her. So I was always going to deliver that promise. But if that one's not the one that's kind of bringing home the bacon, then I'm not going to write 15 books in that series. It's really funny, isn't it? Because I was complaining to a friend about how kind of poorly that book was performing or that series was performing. But like each book has earned my lawyer salary every single book. It's like they're not doing bad. Like they're still doing amazing. But I think
your perspective changes sometimes. I was just talking with somebody else, like the perspective of what we expected back in 2021 versus what we are now. It's completely different. And yeah, it's kind of interesting how we think about that. It kind of just changes.
I think sometimes you've got to try and remind yourself all the time to be grateful for where you are and where you're up to and what your fans are doing. And we're just so lucky to be able to be writers. I
like the way you look at it from a business point of view. Like there's a lot of people, I mean, obviously a lot of people write for different reasons. Some people are writing because it's just passionate and they want to write. Other people like us have made it a career. So it's got to be business oriented. We have our passion things, but focusing on it as a business makes it a lot easier to make those hard decisions that, werewolf's not quite cutting it. We could, bring in something else. So
I think what I found was where in werewolves, there's an ongoing trend of kind of reverse harem, romance, fated mates, rejected mates, alpha holes, and none of that is my jam. Like I don't like any of those things particularly. So then I kind of wrote a werewolf urban fantasy rather than a werewolf paranormal romance.
Okay, so you do a lot of world building, obviously, in fantasy. So, and I read a bunch of your reviews, and many of them said the same thing: is that you do this marvelous world building that's easy to follow. So it's got detail, but you can follow it. And I got to say, that resounded with me because I followed, some of these shows. We're actually watching the Rings series, that they have 3 rings or whatever it is. And I get lost in these shows. And I'm like, now, who's this guy? Who was this? And I'm not the brightest guy. So maybe that's the problem. But I don't follow it. But apparently you've fallen on something that really works in terms of giving them a full, complete world, but not too complicated that they can't follow it. So how did that happen? Did that happen just naturally? Is that the way you write, or was that planned?
It's kind of part of the genre, I would say, because obviously I write urban fantasy rather than epic fantasy. So urban fantasy is obviously magic happening in our daily world. So that makes it so much easier because you're not world building whole new kind of worlds and countries and things like that. You're just adding magic to the world that we already have. And the way that I do that is I tell people the magic realm is almost like you go through a portal and then you can see magic. So it's kind of like the portal puts on glasses for you. And then you can suddenly see that people are fire elementals and they've got fire dancing on their heads, or you can see that they're a dryad because their skin is green and they can walk into trees and all that sort of stuff. So the world building is there, but it's not onerous because the nature of my books is that they're kind of fast paced, fun, humorous reads with like murder and mystery. So I can't get too bogged down into the world because it'll lose that kind of fast-paced read that people expect of me. And I think that that's one of my biggest pieces of advice for authors is like really read the genre that you want to write in, because there are genre expectations, there are genre beats. And if you don't know the genre inside and out, then you'll fall afoul of reader expectations and you'll just do something that's just not going to work, and then it'll fall flat and won't be the hit that you need it to be.
That's so true. And it's especially true in the niche genres or the really defined genres. They've got strong tropes.
Yeah, there's the website. I think we were talking with Alex Sigmore about the TV tropes website. So if you're looking for what the tropes are, that's a great one to kind of jump into and examine what you're looking at to read.
I can't remember. There was an author that did a Kickstarter and she's written a series of books. It's Jennifer Hilt, I think. She's done a series of books called The Trope Thesaurus, and you can get them specifically for your genre too. And like whenever I kind of sit down to write and I'm kind of spitballing ideas in my head, I'll get like the Trope Thesaurus out and I'll just have a quick flew and see if any of them are kind of resonating with the ideas. I'm a complete pantser, so I don't ever put anything in stone, but I just kind of have a think beforehand of what sort of elements I'd like to play with. And I like to have the tropes in mind because, for example, like, you need to know that it's an enemies to lovers romance or whatever you're going to do. So
I'm sort of halfway between plotter and a pantser. Doug is a pantser that's growing into a plotter. I'm a wear-pantser. I do wear pants. Not right now, of course, but I do normally.
Don't stand up. Don't stand up.
I was just going to say, we can't tell.
I noticed no one asked for proof. So I always wonder, with a pantser, how much is it in your head already? Like, how much do you have to think through? Although you don't plot it and write it down, how many elements of the story do you need to have in place, and what do you have planned before you go into it?
So when I sat down to write my first series, my debut series, and all I knew was that she was going to be a PI who could always tell when you were lying, and that her parents were going to be murdered. And the overarching story for the kind of 4 books was going to be finding out who murdered her parents. So each book has like a self-contained mystery, but in each book you were going to have a clue as to the kind of who the ultimate identity of the murderers was. I didn't even know the ending myself. And like when it comes to you as a pantser, it comes to you like, and you're like, oh my God, I'm a freaking genius. Like, how did I know that in book 1 that tiny clue was going to make so much sense of this thing? And like, I just think your brain is just busy working in a way that I can't really kind of consciously understand, but it's laying all sorts of amazing clues for me that I have got no idea consciously about. But then it all comes together in this glorious moment. And it blows my mind. It's my favorite part.
So let me ask you though. So like, I was going to say this because I was listening to you talk. I'm like, okay, wow. So have you gone back and like found you've written yourself? Because sometimes as a pantser, I've had this problem where I've kind of written myself into a corner. And I got to go back and add a few things, and that's my least favorite thing. Go back and find those mistakes that I missed. What do you do about handling that? Do you stick a placeholder in if you come across and you add a clue here? Or I'm always curious how people do that.
Because obviously I did the rapid release plan, what I did was I wrote the 4 books and they were all like in various stages of editing before I even hit publish on book 1. So by then I knew who had done it. So I knew that before I hit publish. So I did go back into the books and kind of just make sure there wasn't anything that was wrong in there. And it was more, I'd write in a couple of extra clues because I hadn't put enough clues in,
Yeah, it needed breadcrumbs.
It needed some more breadcrumbs because obviously I didn't know, so I couldn't write them in. So I went back and wrote in some extra breadcrumbs. I've never yet written myself into a corner, But I think that's partly because I write magic, right? So at the end of the day,
right,
it's just like, and then you find a magic potion.
You've written yourself into a corner loads of times. You've just magicked your way out of it, which is brilliant.
Exactly. So much more
So
fun.
we need to add paranormal stuff to our books, Nick. That's our problem. So
add in a vampire.
Okay. Now, your mum was a writer, and I think your mum had a fairly big influence on your writing career. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. So one of my earliest memories is sitting on her lap in her bedroom, and she had a computer, and it was like, a proper old style computer that was like as thick as the desk, went all the way back. And I was dictating a story to her about going to the zoo, and she was typing it on the computer for me. So that's like one of my earliest memories was like writing a story with my mum. So people say to me like, how does it occur to you to write stories? And I was kind of like, how does it occur to you not to write stories?
Yeah, amen. That's true. Yeah.
It was just part of me, from the beginning. And even when I was at university, I was studying philosophy at the time, and I was a terrible student, and I would stay up till like 3 a.m.
Says the lawyer.
Stories.
Wait a second. Yeah, says the lawyer. No, you're talking to two guys that were terrible students, all right? We got the terrible student down.
Okay, I was a terrible student whilst I was a philosophy degree. When I converted to a law degree, I was sensible and good. But yeah, so I wrote all the time, and then obviously I let it slide during the law years because I was being a very busy, sensible lawyer. And then sadly, my mum passed away, and I kind of came across all of her books on her computers and her manuscripts. And, I've always loved her writing. It was always kind of the fun part. She would always send me her manuscripts, and I'd read them and critique them. And yeah, I loved it.
And she was published?
Well, she'd only published a few short stories. She'd wanted to go trad. So she'd had an agent for a time, but I'd never got anything picked up. So I kind of was like, I want to do this for her. I want to kind of get into this self-published thing. And I kind of thought to myself, listen, she might not have wanted to go the self-published route, but it's better that the books are in the world than not in the world. So that was when I dove into 20 books and spent a load of time learning about the self-publishing industry because it was for her books. And then very naughtily, I still haven't published them. But
I was getting ready to ask you, are they published yet or not? So
no, but I'm actively working on them now. So it's kind of one of my projects, and my editor is primed to receive, and I've got a cover designer lined up for this month. And so that they are actively going to be in the world very soon. And
you will be able to rapid release them.
Yes, exactly. And that's what I'm going to do as well. So that's going to be fun. But her stuff is epic fantasy. So it's the more posh cousin to what I do. So it's harder work kind of editing hers because there's all that heavy world building and stuff like that. But yeah, it's been fun.
So another thing I noticed from the comments about your writing, there's a lot about the emotional content. There's depth to your writing. And you talked about losing your mum. There has to be some influence there.
Oh, undoubtedly. I mean, I think my sister always says that I should go and see a counsellor. And I'm like, I don't need to see a counsellor. I write books.
Yeah.
I'm getting my grief out in the written word.
If we all went and saw counselors, our books would never come out.
I know. And they'd be shit too, right? Like, we need these wounds. Don't take my wounds away from me. Yeah. So my mum died, and then my uncle died, and that was a real surprise because he had a heart attack, and it was my mum's brother, right? So I had to go and tell my nana, who was like quite 90 then, that her son had died, and both her children had predeceased her. And then not long after that, she died. She was 90 though, so that was all right. And then my auntie died. So within like 4 years, I had no, not 4 years, 2 years. 2 years, the four of them had died. So I was all up in grief. I mean, grief was my best friend. And I think that was what I brought to the writing. Obviously, the books that I write are kind of light, humorous escapism, but with that real edge of the main character was dealing with the loss of her parents. So much like me, those moments of grief would hit her. And I think that's really one of the reasons that people connect so hard to my work, is because everybody's lost somebody, really. And so you can always relate to it on some level. And that's the kind of quite often the part that people pull out and they quote and they highlight, and it's kind of that they really connect to that real world element.
What about your demographic for your readers? Like, what do they fall like?
It's quite interesting. I thought that I would be like pretty much 100% women, but I think at this point it's probably more about 70% women and 30% men. And I tend actually to find that my male fans are like my really big super fans. they really, really love my work, which is cool. And generally age-wise, it's often, I think, for kind of like 30s all the way up to retirees, 75-ish, which is lovely. And I think that's part of being maybe in the Kindle Unlimited program, because it brings readers to you that are on fixed income.
I think it's the genre too, because as Doug was alluding to, in mystery thrillers, it's really an older audience. But I think there's a couple of genres that really drag lower because, it's a struggle these days getting younger audiences, right, to read. They're less and less so. There's some avid readers.
Unless you're in romantasy, and then they're just going nuts for it.
Well, and we had another author on who wrote urban fantasy for the dragons and stuff, and I think she said that a lot of hers were older men in her demographics too, and I thought that kind of surprised me a little bit. So I like dragons, and I'm old, so I guess it's not really that surprising. Dragons are cool, so.
Dragons are always cool. It's one of my rules of thumb. When one of my friends said, "Oh, my book's really boring," and she was writing urban fantasy, I said, "Listen, there's 3 things that you need to do. You need to drop a body, add a dragon, or add a bomb. Any one of those, and your book's gonna pick up pace straight away."
Is it true you met your husband jumping out of an airplane?
Yeah, we met skydiving. So when I was at Liverpool during said philosophy chilling heydays, I joined the Liverpool Student Skydiving Society, and I used to go up to a place called CARC, the Northwest Parachute Centre, and that's up in the Lake District. So it was like a beautiful place to go and skydive. And yeah, so we met at one of the weekends on the courses, and for several years we jumped out of planes together until we got married and boring and had kids.
So you talked about your mom, and you obviously have done a lot with her, but Harris is her name. Is that correct? Is that what I was reading?
Oh, yeah. So Heather G. Harris. My Harris is my mum's maiden name. So it's kind of like a little nod that she's kind of with me with my career. The G stands for my real... My friends say that it stands for great, but it actually stands for my real surname. Like, that's the initial of my real surname.
Oh, wow. But have you had competitions to guess the G's? Because we want to guess the G's. I had Ganja Girl written down.
You also had gobsmacking, and I didn't know what that was. Like, what the heck is gobsmack?
Gee, Heather knows weird. What gobsmack is.
Yes. See, you're being English again, and that's all weird.
we do love being English. Yeah. Nick, I mean, do you still identify as an Englishman now you live not in England?
Well, especially with things that are going on in America right now, I do. Definitely do. Although I'm like, I'm British. Not my fault.
I actually kind of identify as it. I go back far enough. I got a little... I can be British too.
Yeah, I'm a little bit international. I'm kind of lost because I left the UK when I was 21. I lived in America since. So I've actually lived in America longer than I lived in the UK, and most of my family have left there. So it's kind of weird. When I go back there, I don't have an anchor, like a place to go to, like the family home. I can drive by it and someone else has owned it for, 30 years.
You can just go in, tell them you're American now, and they'll
go bang on the door. We did that a few years back, actually. We went and banged on the door of one of the places we lived. So I said, hey, we used to live here. And I was like, so?
All right.
Yeah. So what? Yeah. No, he did. They invited us in, and it was very, very nice and kind of fun. But yeah, it's kind of weird. I don't always feel completely anchored anymore, like there's no place where I go, hey, that's home. It's a little bit odd. So something we ask everybody that's on the show is, what do you think your author superpower is? Whether it's in the business side of it or the creative side of it, what do you think is the author superpower you bring to the table?
I think it's hard to pick. I'm going to say my ability to build super fans. My fans really love me, and that is like the most beautiful thing that you can ever have. You get people emailing you being like, you've made a difference to my life, I'm disabled and stuck in bed and you've really picked me up, or I'm going through the worst time ever and your books were such a bomb, anything like that, and I'll just bawl, and I just get this feedback from people where they're just like, your writing just meant so much to me, and I'm like, thank you. Because every now and again people are like, you used to be a lawyer, don't you miss that? You used to help people being a lawyer. And I'm like, yeah, I did. But I help more people now with my fiction. And I think in a deeper way almost, because as a lawyer, I was just getting people monetary compensation, but you couldn't undo the wrong that had been done to them. Whereas this is just really helping people's mental health a lot of the time. I think in a difficult time, escapism is more needed than ever.
Yeah. And it is always something when you get those emails that you helped me through my husband's death, or and it just blows me away every time. And I'm in awe that I even have that kind of influence on me.
It never stops being a privilege. Like, I'm still so grateful that I'm an author and not a lawyer. Like, it's just an amazing thing. Yeah, it is the best job ever. We get to make shit up and people pay us for it. Wow.
And Nick does not have to wear pants right now.
I rarely have to wear pants. So, Douglas, we have one more question for you. And Douglas has a wheel he's going to spin.
We have our wheel.
Oh, okay. They
Flash,
do have a real wheel.
No expense spared.
No expense spared.
Yeah, we might not have pants, but we have a wheel.
Yeah, I'm going to have to think about getting a new one. This one's kind of wearing out, too. So, spinning the wheel too much.
Wow, you let it fly that time.
I really wanted that one to go. So, okay. So, if you could choose your choice, anybody alive or dead, any musician or group who could write and play the soundtrack to your books, who would you choose? Please say Jethro Tull.
No.
Thank God she said no. Thank God she said no.
I said no straight away. I like rock, okay, and I think a lot of my scenes are quite rocky, and especially when I'm trying to get into a mindset where I'm writing like a big battle scene, I love listening to a really violent rock song and kind of letting it go. But lately, and this is going to be horrific, but lately my 7-year-old is super into Taylor Swift. So I've been listening to Taylor Swift. So there's been a few songs of hers that I did not expect to like Taylor Swift. Like, I didn't think I was going to be a Swiftie. But there's been a few songs of hers that have been like real inspiration.
They're annoyingly good. You know,
so
in the
fantastic.
catchy pop department, they're annoyingly good.
I have to recognize it as a strong female who is also self-publishing. You know, that's got to be...
Yeah, actually, she just announced today or this week that she's putting out a self-publishing book, too, and everything. That's going to be just really impressive.
Yeah, she is pretty amazing. Talk about world building. She's built her own world, which is amazing. How about you, Doug? What would be yours?
I think for Chase, I always have this envision the song of "I Need a Hero." I think that's a cool one to kind of as a background for that. It could, go with it. I think that's a good one, just as a general one. Although I do tend to listen to a lot of. I'm big into rock, and so I'm always listening to like the Stones. But I'll throw on an album or a vinyl and listen to one side of it while I'm writing, and then take the break and flip it. So give me like a short little sprint, and then I do the next one. What about you, sir? What's yours?
Pearl Jam. Yeah, if I could come back as anyone, I in this world, I want to come back as Eddie Vedder. I think he's the most charismatic human being ever. So yeah, and we saw them earlier this year. Yeah, beginning of this year. They're amazing live. So probably Pearl Jam. I'm not sure AJ Bailey, my protagonist, would necessarily. Well, I don't think she'd disagree. She wakes up in the morning to Metallica, so she'd probably agree. And Nora would be just like, whatever. Cool. This has been brilliant, Heather. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. It's been a blast.
She is fine. Wow.
She's awesome.
She stayed up late for us, too.
I know. She stayed up late, which was really cool. And, I chatted with her, met her 2 years ago, and then chatted with her again at Nick this year a little bit. And we just happened to sit at the same table. And then we're like, oh, we met last year kind of thing, and chatted for a while. And she's absolutely lovely. And she is very switched on. I mean, what she's got going on with her, I mean, she's a brilliant writer, number one, right? So she's putting out great product. But the way she's gone about it, especially to start, this is kudos to Heather, because she launched in 2021. I launched in basically 2020. Couple of books came out earlier, but essentially I started down the path in 2020. And she did all the things I did wrong, she did right. So she really was smart about the way she entered into it and went about it with the rapid release. She obviously nailed the market correctly. She knew her audience right away and wrote to it. So it was really interesting hearing how she linked her series together, and she brings her audience along on that ride through the series.
Smart, because it does keep you keeps you fresh because you can kind of you're going to want to delve into other characters, but also keeps things interesting. And if she's writing, we even talked about how fast she's writing because she must be writing pretty quick. But if you can keep up the series, you're going to keep feeding that whole thing. And even if you stop one series like she's doing because financially it's not doing as well as the other ones, and you want to jump onto another one, it gives you more opportunity to keep growing in that same world without having to recreate everything. So you're not, it's not quite rinse and repeat like we talked about before. It's just more of a, you're still doing something. It's similar, but it's already in this world. It's already built, and you don't have to come up with new rules. You don't have to come up with anything else. It's pretty smart. And like she had mentioned, you can market it so much easier because you still you're buying into one book and there's now 4 or 5 series to go with it. I think it's a smart idea.
Yeah, very much so. I think that's great. And, it's the same but different as having a really long series, right? So you can do this by having a really long series, but just bringing people along for that ride. But one of the things that you do get with a really long series, once you get over, and different people have a different number, but there's a certain number at which time when they see that book come out, a new audience that you're trying to bring in, they see the new book come out and it's book 15 in a series. They're going to read book 15. There's only a small handful of those people that are going to go back and go, okay, I'm going to start back at book 1 and I'm going to start. It's daunting, right? I mean, it's like, maybe I won't like it, but I like the look of this new one. So with the way she's doing it, she brings somebody in, she's launching book 4 in a series. They're going to go back, grab book 1 because it's not that long ago. They binge read through 4. They're desperate for more. Hey, look, there's more in this world with these spin-off characters and keeping people engaged. Really, really smart. And like you said, it keeps for her, she's in the same universe, but she's a slightly different place in it, different character, which is fresh to write and interesting. So very clever. She's done a brilliant job.
Well, she came at it smart, looking at it from, like she said, it's very business-like. So she's looking at what is working, and without having to create anything. Like, if dragons are cool this year, she can add a dragon. It's brilliant in my opinion. So it's a good way to do it. And then I think that's smart to come at anything you do with some kind of a logical sense. I never do that, but it's smart to do it.
Well, I think the key is that she is really smart and we're not. And that's the key to the show, really, isn't it? It's the whole thing. Is we're a couple of dumbasses, which we prove over and over again, especially myself. But we have really smart guests, and that's the only reason to listen to the show. But
I told you we should name this the Two Dumbasses podcast.
The Two Dumbasses podcast. Yeah, that would have worked. And then we could have talked about anything. Yeah, it could be. Because we could talk about anything, because we're dumbasses pretty much in everything we do.
I think we do that anyway, so...
Well, we may do, yeah. Well, thank you, everyone who does listen to our show. We do really, really appreciate it. And check out the show notes, get links. You must go to Heather's website. You'll be mesmerized by the little starry thing on the homepage. It's brilliant. So we'll have her links in there, links to her books, our books, social media. Follow us on social if you would. Look for new episodes every 2 weeks. And until next time, be cool to each other.
Fair winds and following seas.
You've been listening to the Two Authors podcast with Nicholas Harvey and Douglas Pratt. Subscribe on your favourite platform for alerts on new shows coming every 2 weeks.